Hi. Hi, everyone. Most of you don't know me. My name is Misha Mehta. I am a bereaved mother to Neve Kulte, who was diagnosed with a pediatric brain tumor called DIPG. He battled for 15 months. Today, I'm a moderator, and it gives me great pleasure to. Before I can do that, I have to read disclaimer. Sorry, this is my first time around, so I'm going to get the hang of it. This is not for medical advice, it's only for information. And everything said and the video recording will be made public. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mike Pyne today. Mike is uniquely qualified to talk about the navigation challenges of glioblastoma patients and his caregivers. When he firsthand saw his friends' challenges upon being diagnosed with GBM, he set out to develop tools that would help support people in similar situations. Medo Health revolutionizes how GBM patients access treatments and clinical trials, simplifying the search based on genetic mutations and disease stages. There are many apps that are currently in the market that will help cancer patients and their caregivers to navigate and automate some of these, cancer journey tasks. But none that are specifically made for GBM, and this tool is specific for GBM. Medo Health tool is at an early stage of design, and Mike is working on a second iteration of a prototype, and that's what he's going to be talking to us today. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you very much, Misha. Thanks everyone for hopping on the call. My name is Mike. I'm one of the co-founders of Medo Health, which is a digital health platform that helps glioblastoma patients search, find, and understand treatments and clinical trials that are available to them. So, as most people have probably experienced on this call, when you're diagnosed with cancer or a condition, time is of the essence. And what I noticed is one of my friends was actually diagnosed with glioblastoma, and he wanted to understand and find what treatments and clinical trials options were available to him other than what his doctor was offering him. And he said he couldn't believe how difficult it was for him to understand the information, understand what he was eligible for, and then even find the doctors that offer that treatment or clinical trial as a service. So he asked me to help him navigate it because I have nearly 10 years experience of working in the medical device space. I basically did sales, marketing, product development for innovative orthopedic treatment options. But I also created a lot of content around educating patients on the options they had available. When I tried to help him, I couldn't believe how difficult it was. I knew there were some platforms out there that you could easily just try and search the different clinical trials that are available, but the information was extremely difficult to understand because there was so much medical jargon. Then from that, I even found he had so many questions about all of these treatments, and none of them could be answered from different websites and trying to navigate the web. So what I decided to do was just create a simple platform that allows patients to, one, search by using filtering out what options they have based on their genetic mutation, where they live, and the stages of the disease if they're newly diagnosed or reoccurrence, because we didn't want to give them too many options. We wanted to be more specific. What I also wanted to do is help them understand. I just didn't want to give them a clinical trial. I didn't want to give them a treatment. I wanted them to have their questions answered by basically incorporating an AI tool that allows them to ask questions about the treatment or clinical trial they're looking at. The next step was help them easily find the doctors that offer that treatment in their local area or close by. And then the last part is their eligibility. Help them understand if they're highly eligible or not eligible at all, basically on asking them a few simple questions about their condition, about their experiences in layman's terms that they would be able to answer themselves. And they are basically the 4 steps of how Medo works. So what I would like to do is basically show you how it works. Each stage, I'm going to pause and ask for any feedback, open to answering any questions you guys may have, and I want to keep it as informative and engaging as possible. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and I'm going to start with just showing you and giving you an overview of exactly how Medo works, and then each stage I'll pause and I'll be willing to answer any questions any of you may have. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. I just want to also state that we're in the early stages of the development of Meadow. So there might be a few little mistakes or it might be perfect, but that's why I wanted to do this call so we can get a little bit of feedback and make little improvements on areas that might not be perfect or areas that can be improved. So as you can see here, what I noticed was there's definitely a few different companies out in the market that do something similar to Meadow. But Meadow differentiates in two very different ways. The first one is we wanted to give patients options without them having to fill out hundreds of questions. The way I thought about it is anytime someone's looking for a house, they go to Zillow to look at the different options they have first. Once they find a house, they contact a realtor, and then all the work behind it actually goes on to make sure they can buy the house or rent it. I wanted to do the same thing with Meadow. I wanted to make it as easy as possible by filtering down some of the options, by giving patients treatments that they can actually learn and understand about they're potentially eligible for. I didn't want to create any barriers to entry. The second thing is I wanted to filter out the ones that weren't going to be applicable from the start without asking for too much information. So as you can see here in the search bar, we basically ask for 4 pieces of information: their condition, the variation, their mutation that the patient has. As you can see, we have hundreds of different mutations that we just put in. And again, only some of these are relevant, but we wanted to try and include them all. The reoccurrence, okay, are you newly diagnosed or is this a reoccurrence? And then the location you're in. The reason why we thought it was important to put the location is because we thought it'd be a lot easier just to filter down the options that are within a 100-mile radius or a 200-mile radius of where you currently live. That would just give the patient less choice, and it would also just help them understand, okay, this is what's local to me, but if they wanted to find the options that are outside them, they could always use a filter. So all you pretty much have to do from that is enter generic pieces of information and press the search bar. If you don't know your mutation, if you don't want to put it in a location and you just want to try the whole of the US, you can literally remove those pieces of information and it will just give you more options across the whole of the United States for clinical trials and treatments. And then when you press search, it basically goes to the next stage. So that is the basic search function. And I know that's really simple, but does anyone have any questions about those particular things that I just spoke about?
Yeah. What if you have multiple mutations?
So really good point. What we're trying to do and what we're going to do is on this particular part of the page, we're going to add like a filter section. And basically that filter will allow you to edit or add more filters to it. So for example, if you have more than one mutation or you want to try a number of different cities across the United States, we're going to have a little pop-up bar here that's going to allow the patient just to change the filters so they can actually get more accurate results. Again, very similar to how like Zillow works. It only asks for a small piece of information first, and then it gives you filter options the further you go down. We're also going to do the same thing because we know that's going to be an important part because each person is slightly different. They're going to want to filter certain pieces of information. So that's something that we're going to build in. We just don't have it done yet because the way we look at it is we want to basically walk before we can run, build the basics, and then once we have the basics, build the features that make a bigger difference and make it a better experience. And you'll probably hear me say that a lot over the next hour when I'm talking about this.
Thank you.
So the next stage is basically breaking down the information into different categories. What I noticed with my friend is also that there was a lot of clinical trial sites that help patients find clinical trials, but they offered no other types of treatments. So what I wanted to do is basically create a system that was easily interactable, or that your patients and users could interact with Meadow. They could clearly understand what treatments are approved, what's in clinical trials, what's off-label. Depending on all the clinical trials around, we just wanted to break it down. And for example, one thing I noticed from a lot of feedback and from patients is the clinical trials they're learning about are actually only focusing on the clinical trials, the structure of it, and very little information about the actual treatment that's the primary focus. So what I wanted to do is basically create, sorry, it's just loading here. I think my internet's a little slow. I wanted to explain the treatment first to the patient, because that's what the patient has the most questions about. If you don't explain the treatment, the patient doesn't really understand why the clinical trial is being conducted. So what we decided to do is focus on just the treatment first, and then help them find doctors, and then help them find the clinical trial. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening with this. It shouldn't be. My apologies. I think it's my internet. It gets really slow sometimes.
It's following the law of all demos.
I know. And the annoying thing is this website is live, so it shouldn't actually be doing it. I'm going to change it to this website, because I know sometimes Google Chrome. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry, I'm going to share my screen again. Apologies about this. Okay, so sorry about that. So when we go into clinical trials, like I mentioned, it will filter out the clinical trials based on the information that you've given, filter out the treatments. But what we wanted to do before we just jumped straight to the clinical trial and explaining it in depth, we wanted to explain what the primary focus treatment was. Because like I mentioned, from the feedback we got, patients want to understand about the treatment first, because that's usually considered the most experimental part. That's where they have the questions. And that's where we're trying to differentiate ourselves. What we want to do is try to actually break down and explain the treatment by using two different things. One, by using AI, which we've incorporated into Meadow Health, and the other is by using video content, which we're trying to create. The whole idea is if a patient has a specific question, they can get it answered without having to speak to a doctor, or at least go to a different website, because patients become really empowered with the more information they have. And a lot of the information right now is on a number of different websites. You might find a clinical trial or a treatment on one particular website, but it doesn't answer any questions you have about it. And you have to go to a number of different websites and try to play a guessing game on where to find information, how are my questions answered. Because if you can't empower the patient with information, they're never going to want to, they don't feel as educated as and informed in the decision-making process. And again, everyone's always very aware it's the patient and the patient's loved one that is going to be making the decision. So the whole idea is, okay, we break down how all of these different treatments work by giving a little piece of information, breaking it down, but then also by asking AI a series of questions. So we developed this AI to basically answer questions that patients have. And what we do is we create our own that are frequently asked questions. And then how the AI works is it takes the question, it pulls all the information from a number of different credible sources, and it gives you an answer. But the answer is given in two ways. One, that a patient understands, and two, in a non-biased fashion. A lot of the tools that I see being used when it comes to answering patients' questions are very, very biased. The whole idea of Meadow is to create a platform that's not biased to specific treatments, to specific clinical trials. Because what we're just trying to do is give general information about the topic that people are interested in learning more about, and trying to find a doctor or trying to find a provider for. So as you can see, you can ask it a question: how does CAR T-cell therapy work in targeting and treating glioblastoma cancer cells? And here is the answer. And again, it's actually produced in a way that makes it really, really simple for patients to understand. Because if the answer is too complex, they're not going to understand it. And then as you can see, you have read more here. We only take the answers from clinical papers that have been published, because we feel like they're actually extremely credible sources. And if you want to actually find these clinical papers, all you have to do is click on the link and it brings you to it here. If you want to share it with your doctor, if you want to look through and read it a little bit more, you can, and you know exactly where the source of the information has come from. So that's pretty much how Meta works when it comes to understanding the treatments that are available for the information you put in. The next step would be, okay, finding a doctor and understanding a little bit more about the clinical trial. But I'd like to open it up to anyone that might have any questions, that might want to ask anything they'd like about this particular topic or anything that I've shown them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you go back one screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you figure out the order of these items?
So good question. Right now, it's actually it's actually alphabetical, as you could see there. But the more information you put in, the less options you get. We're not trying to promote or put a treatment up the scale because we partner with a life science company or anything. We're just trying to make it as non-biased as possible without pushing one particular one because we have a partnership with them. So right now, it's just alphabetical, which we think is the fairest order for us to do it in.
We do kind of a similar type of thing, and we're trying to get it in order of how good they are, basically.
Yeah. And that's actually a great idea.
Yeah, especially you have you already looked for all the research behind in the publications. You could
Yeah.
probably ask your large language model to rank these by success.
So so the way the large language model works, and we're still trying to make and get a few kinks out of it. But the idea of Meta AI is to summarize information and explain information rather than give biased opinions on what's the best and what's the worst. I think it's really important that Meta stays as neutral as possible. What we're trying to do is give people basic information without actually saying this is the best, this is the worst, because that looks biased. The whole idea is, okay, there's 10 people who are using Meta. One person might want to look for a particular type of treatment or clinical trial. Another might want to look for another one. The less biased we are, the better the user experience. We think it's best for us to just give people the information based on what they're looking for. But then also it's like, okay, let a doctor decide by us connecting you to them if it's the best thing for you or not. And I do personally think bias is a really important thing, because as soon as you start partnering with companies, your opinions shift dramatically to your own pocket. And I really want to try to keep it as unbiased as possible with all the information we give. So that's why I'm trying not to particularly rank them for this moment of time. And again, this is why it's a very good learning curve for us, because we're just trying to figure out, okay, what works and what doesn't, so we could create a better product from it too. And that might be the best way to go eventually.
I would say most people would assume, like even just from a Google search, that the first item is the most important one.
Yeah.
And to randomly have it by what they happen to title the treatment by seems kind of strange.
Okay. No, that's a
Also,
good point.
what is your business model? So how are you going to fund this?
Yeah, so basically how Meta works is, okay, if a patient comes to the platform and they apply for a clinical trial or a treatment, basically what we do is we get all their information, ask them a series of questions, and then they basically create a profile from it. The clinical trial provider, the treatment provider that they want to speak to, we will contact them and say, hey, we have a patient that's interested in applying for your clinical trial. Do you want to accept this patient? Here's some basic information about their medical record without seeing any of their personal information. And if they accept the information, they pay a small fee. If they don't, we help them find someone else. And that's what I'm going to explain a little bit more later, further in the call, is about what we're currently building and why we're building it. So the whole idea is to connect patients to eligible treatments and clinical trials, but then also reduce the cost dramatically for life science companies and doctors that are trying to recruit patients, to speed up the recruitment process, but also save them money, because we know those are two things that cost so much of the resources that they have when it comes to clinical trials.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I have a question. This is Amit Katani.
Yeah. Hey, how are
Um,
you?
Good, thank you. I missed the start of the presentation a little bit, so
Mhm.
apologize if I'm being repetitive.
No problem.
The we are focused on brain cancer here, of course, but from an AI training perspective, or kind of what AI can do in this space,
Mhm.
is this um, trained to focus on to do more brain cancer stuff, or the same engine can be done for or ask questions for prostate cancer or pancreatic cancer or anything else?
Yes. So right now, the platform only helps you find treatments for glioblastoma. The reason is we wanted to start with one, get it right, and then start going into other areas where we feel like there's a need for this. With Meadow AI, you can actually ask it any question about any health condition. So you can get any answers you want by using this particular tool. But the rest of it, like I showed you, the flow of the website is specifically designed for glioblastoma right now.
Okay. And where are you in you said this is public website.
Yes.
I mean, how long ago was it launched? What's the
Yeah.
maturity status?
Yeah. So I launched version 1 8 months ago in August of 2023. And then basically we had a very simple website. I'll show you a little more what the next steps are and how it works. But it was a very simple website that basically brought you to this page. You could go no further, and we would basically have links to some of the clinical trial providers that had CAR T-cell therapy for glioblastoma. And it would bring you externally to another website. But basically, we've built out the back end, which makes it a lot more, which help patients find providers and then apply through our platform. And it makes it a lot more streamlined and a lot more efficient on a number of different angles, or in a number of different ways.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Brad had a
Yeah.
question about bias. I actually had the same question. Like,
Yeah.
how does bias creep into the selection process or the presentation process, and how do you mitigate it?
Yeah, so I think it's really hard to have a perfect system when it comes to bias, but as soon as payers, i.e. life science companies, hospitals that are trying to recruit for clinical trials come into the picture, you can very easily get sideswiped by bias. And I really want to try and stay away from that as much as possible, because the less bias there is, the more trust you can build between person using Meadow and the platform itself.
So does it show up in SEO, or like how does the search engine actually pick up that the hospital is recruiting really hard for patients?
On our platform, on Meadow or on Google, are you saying?
Through your platform, like.
Yes, so it's all done manually between myself and Michael. Basically, we keep an eye on everything that is currently being published in a number of different channels that have clinical trials, and we basically keep up to date with it. And we use different APIs, which are basically little pieces of technology that connect information from loads of individual websites to Meadow. So it constantly gets kept up to date with the information that's been published in other websites. So it's not through SEO. It's basically just aggregating all the information that's out there and just pulling it to one particular place.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So the third stage to this is basically finding a provider. The whole idea of Meadow, like we mentioned, is help people search, help people understand, like I just showed you, but then also help them find the doctors and healthcare providers in their local area that offer this treatment or clinical trial as a service. So let's say you've asked, or the user or patient has asked Meadow series of questions about CAR T-cell therapy. They want to understand and find a little bit more information about they've asked a number of questions. They've got a lot more information. They're a little bit more educated. They want to understand, okay, where do I find doctors? And in order to do that, what it does is it basically will show you the doctors in your local area that offer all of the clinical trials for CAR T-cell therapy based on the filtering that you've done in the search bar initially. So as you can see here, I actually changed it earlier. So as you can see here, for CAR T-cell therapy, there was none in San Francisco, but it automatically brought you down to Los Angeles, where there's 2 facilities that have a CAR T-cell therapy treatment. All you have to do in order to get there is click on this link. And what it does, it actually shows you the clinical trials for CAR T-cell therapy. As you can see here, there's 2 options. You can just look at this, you can look briefly and get the information about the clinical trial. And you can contact the clinical trial provider through this, or what you could do is to learn about the full clinical trial itself, you just click learn more. It brings you to this website, and what we basically do is we take all the information from clinicaltrials.gov, we restructure the information to make it really easily understandable and lay it out in a way that patients can understand it and follow it, because a lot of the websites, 1, basically use way too much medical jargon, or 2, don't have enough information on them. So as you can see here, all of the information that's on clinicaltrial.gov basically is all repurposed onto this particular page. Again, this is only if you want to learn more about the clinical trial itself, and this is the specific clinical trial. So if we go back.
Hey, Mike, a quick question here.
Yep.
When you do that, does it also tells you the eligibility criteria? Because there's a lot of times that, you like something that you're excited about,
Yes.
that fits it, but, you don't meet the eligibility criteria.
Yes, so there's actually 2 ways of doing it. One is here. So what we actually did is we basically we took all the eligibility criteria from clinicaltrials.gov, but we restructured it so it's really easy to understand for patients. As you can see here, it says eligibility criteria. We actually show the original as well, because we think it's really important that we show the original criteria of it. But what we did is we broke it down so it's really easy understandable for the patient. But what we do next is, I'll basically talk you through this. If you want to contact this trial or contact the doctor or the location that you selected, when you press contact trial, this is where you complete a profile and we ask you a series of questions. From this, it basically asks for a number of different generic things. Sorry, this might take a little longer because I have to just sign in. It asks you 3 different stages. Your name, where you were born, all the generic information you can think of. And then just basic information about you. And these are just all the generic pieces of information. And then what it does, it brings you to a section where it actually asks about your condition. Okay, like this. What condition do you have? What genetic markers apply to you? Just double checking. And then what previous treatments have you had? As you can see here, we just put in stage 4. We already selected this. And then what it does is, this is where it asks eligibility questions. These are specific to the clinical trial that you clicked on or you're interested in applying for. And as you can see, we just have some simple questions like yes, no, or unsure. By clicking yes, basically it gives you an idea that you're highly eligible for this particular clinical trial based on the questions that you've answered. If you answer no to them, what we're trying to do is we're basically just trying to have this warning sign come up, which should be actually implemented over the next few weeks, where it says, hey, based on your information, information you gave about the clinic or about the eligibility questions, you're extremely ineligible for this clinical trial. And that just helps patients know and understand, okay, based on the information they gave, they're highly eligible or if they're not eligible at all. And these are basically just by answering simple yes or no questions that are already out there on a number of sites. But it also just doesn't help the patient. It also helps the provider on the other end, because they know it's like, okay, the patient's answered a few questions that helps us understand what their eligibility is like before we even speak with them. And we're actually working on this a lot more and building out a few interesting tools that will even make this a lot more efficient moving forward, which I can talk about in a few minutes. As you can see here, I hope that answers your question. Sorry if I interrupted there.
Yes, it does. I had a follow-up question. Does it also mean that you have to fill out the basic information for every trial you want to see the eligibility criteria for?
Yes. This is where it gets interesting, where I'll show you after you create a profile, which is what we're currently doing right now. We'll all have your information based on a profile, and then from that, we'll be able to, one, help you understand which ones you're more eligible for on the back end, and two, if you've already filled out some of the questions, you know you're highly eligible for them anyway, so it makes it a lot easier for the patient. So once you fill out the information, like every clinical trial and every treatment is going to have slightly different eligibility criteria. So it very much depends on how different the eligibility questions are. But the more information we get on patients, the more we can help them understand, find the options that are best suited to them. And that's something I'll speak about in a minute with the technology that we're building currently, which actually streamlines that significantly. As you can see here, everything is about consent. There's two pieces of consent we ask for. One is, would you like other researchers that have treatments or clinical trials that you potentially are eligible for to contact you? You could say yes, your information goes into a database that clinical trial providers, doctors can actually see your profile, none of your personal information, but your profile based on some of the questions that you've answered on Meadow when you're creating a profile. If you say no, it doesn't happen. It's very much up to the patient and what they would like to do. This is just to help people actually automate the process so they don't have to find the options themselves. This actually just gives them more options from a potential healthcare professional or an expert in the field that can be like, hey, based on your profile, it looks like you might be eligible for a clinical trial that we're holding for immunotherapy. It's just another way to kind of give patients more hope on getting more options without having to do it all themselves. Also, this is just if you're registering on behalf of yourself. And again, this is consent to share your information. This is where an electronic record is created with your signature, basically stating that you're okay for your information to be shared from Meadow to the healthcare provider you want to speak with. And again, very important that we actually do that because we need patient consent or the user consent in every aspect. And again, this is just a reason why did you apply. So that is pretty much the section. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I just shared with them there? And I'm just going to log in to show you what happens on the back end.
Yes. Another question. If somebody selects like an off-label therapy, do you still connect them to doctors who are likely to use it?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I tried to do initially is there's actually a few different clinical trials that are studying off-label therapies. The whole idea is to give them to them first. But again, not trying to be biased, I want them to know the options that, what doctors are out there that they can speak to about this off-label treatment. Because we know that there's a lot of people out there that have different opinions. Some people want to go for an off-label treatment because they've heard or gathered information on it. Some people want to look at alternative treatments, natural treatments, nutritional treatments, cannabis treatments. I'm not trying to be biased in any way, so I'm trying to give people the information that they want and just point them in the right direction to a healthcare professional or an expert that can help them get more information about that particular topic. I'm just going to unshare my screen here so I can actually share my website or get to my profile on a different desktop. Sorry about that. Has anyone else any questions just about briefly what I've shown them there, or any concerns? Please feel free to voice your opinion completely. And if you don't want to voice it right now, feel free to email me. I'll give you guys the link so you can go through it in more detail. You can give more in-depth feedback if you like. I'm very open to suggestions or concerns, anything that you guys potentially feel.
Hey, Mike, I've got one question. I work with a lot of folks with natural treatments,
Yep.
and yours is so trial-based. It's great because you're going to get the conventional medicine people are going to be on board here.
Yep.
But from a food and diet standpoint, I actually have a real good input for glio patients on something they can try. How would you handle something like that?
Yeah, so at the start, and apologies, I probably skipped over it, I break down all the treatment options in different categories. So as you can see here, we actually have natural treatments. These are just like supplements you can take. Off-label treatments, just a list of the off-label treatments that are available for glioblastoma that people are using. And then we have cannabis treatments and nutritional treatments. The whole idea of Meadow, again, was I know there's a lot of platforms out there that offer you clinical trials, but no one actually offers you the treatments that are in different categories. And you can even say that we have FDA approved treatments. Like, for example,
Right.
like we've pretty much put everything in here where we think that it's like, okay, a lot of these are the standard of care, but I know also there is a high percentage of people offer tumor treating fields, but there also isn't. So we wanted to try and create a platform that gives people all of their options. We don't have it perfectly designed yet, but we know we're getting there just by offering the right information and putting it in the right place. That's easy for people to understand also. And as you can see, like nutritional, for example, I was just testing around with this, but like the ketogenic diets there, and there is some little pieces of information that we're still missing. Keto doesn't have anything specific in it yet, but we're going to add that out because we know that the keto diet is very important to a lot of people with GBM, and a lot of people have had good success with it. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It's perfect. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, so the next stage is basically, this is the profile that's created after you complete the application that you just saw for the particular clinical trial. What we wanted to do here is we wanted to, one, have all the treatments or clinical trials that you're interested in saved in a specific location, so you can always go back to them and learn more about them or ask any questions. Two, all of your personal information is kept in a specific location. Three, any question you ask AI, it will automatically save here, so you can always go back to it and learn or read about the questions that you asked, because it's very easy to forget about them. And then four, these are basically, this section is going to be messages that you have between you and the healthcare provider that you reached out to for any of the trials. But what we also wanted to do is create, like I mentioned earlier, content is going to be a huge part of how Meadow works. The reason is patients have so many questions about so many topics. We want to provide them content of one, doctors talking about frequently asked questions, and two, patients doing it on all the different treatments they're potentially interested in. That's all. We're trying to incorporate that part into the earlier stages that I showed you on the treatment side, but we also want to try and incorporate it here. Right now, we don't have any content recorded just because it's probably something that I'm struggling with a little bit, because one, it's really difficult to get, and two, it's very, very expensive, and we're like, we don't have that much money to spend on healthcare professionals recording content. So what we decided to do is just basically create a simple newsfeed for the time being that constantly updates and gives you information from a number of different sources like YouTube, social media, or like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, on topics about glioblastoma. Every day, this is just updated with anything that comes in new. And then what we do is we just easily give patients access to, and loads of different resources about glioblastoma that they can just get through Meadow platform. The idea of what we're trying to do here, though, in this particular location is very similar to what Rune do, except Rune focus on frequently asked questions for the condition and glioblastoma itself. What we're trying to do is have a lot of frequently asked questions about the treatments and have doctors and patients that have done those treatments talk about it on this particular platform. Because, like I mentioned earlier, educating patients is empowering patients. people spend so much time online looking for answers to the things they find, are looking for answers about treatment options, looking for answers about a topic they learned about. We're trying to incorporate all that into one platform, and it's marrying the digital platform with the artificial intelligence with educational content. We know that's going to be the winning factor that differentiates us massively to what other companies are doing out in the market. And content and patient education and user education is the most important part to us, because if we don't do that well, we're never going to be able to get people to come to the platform, because we want it to be resourceful. And that is pretty much the whole platform, start to finish.
I have just a quick suggestion.
Yeah.
I noticed, like, if you click on treatments, you see all the clinical trials that they were looking at. You might want to, like, do a quick search on those clinical trials and see which ones are still active, because you have one here that's not active anymore.
So, very good point. We actually, like 2-3 weeks ago, Michael and I went through all of the clinical trials that were, there was actually a lot of them. I think in total we have 287. We went through all of them and tried to scan through clinicaltrials.gov, and we knew we probably missed one or two. So you're actually spot on. There's a few things that we must change, and these are the little mistakes that we're making, and this is why we're trying to
Well, you could just use the clinical trials API and just quickly just check those, like, 3 different clinical trials, just to see if they're open or not at the time. Because you have to update that frequently, just to avoid wasting time and energy. And second, on your list of approved treatments, you missed gamma tiles.
So, okay, so, and this is where I must do a little bit more improvements. We know this part isn't perfect, and there is a few different things that gamma tiles we must add. So thank you for that. And this is, I'm really glad to get this information, because I know I'm missing little things here or there. The more feedback we get, the more honesty we get, the better we can make this platform. So please, anyone that has any other suggestions like that, feel free to keep it coming, because we're very, very open to suggestions and ways we can improve it and things that we're missing, just so we can make it a better overall experience.
There is a comment in the chat. Vanessa says that clinicaltrial.gov is not always updated in a timely manner. Do you have any alternate sources that you get your clinical trials information from, like talking to the doctors directly that are running the trials?
So as of now, no, because we don't have the relationships built up with any of the life science companies or hospitals and doctors that are offering these clinical trials. Eventually, yes, we'd like to keep a very close tab with this and be informed once we have those relationships built, but we don't quite yet. And that's one of the pitfalls of, like Vanessa mentioned, with a number of these, websites. They're a little bit lagged or a little bit delayed. That's something we want to try and change, but we just don't have the answers to that yet. And it's, oh, this doesn't sound like an excuse. We're trying to focus on so many things, and we know where we want to go with it and what things we need to do in order to make it really perfect. But it might take us a little bit of time to get there. So that's something we know, because I think Vanessa mentioned that to me in the past as well. It's something that we have a pulse on, but we probably won't be able to get there until we actually have all the relationships built with a number of the different providers, hospitals, and doctors.
Are you doing anything with advocacy groups?
So we actually tried to partner with a few different nonprofits, and just basically tried to work with them to get feedback. Because we knew that, okay, if we partner with nonprofits who are dealing with glioblastoma and helping patients navigate the care pathway, it would be a really good way to, help give people the platform and get some feedback about, what improvements we can make, how can we make it better, what is missing from it. And
I think just including them in your ecosystem like you're talking about, because they'll know.
Yes.
They usually have real good updated information on all the trials as well.
Yeah. And we're currently in the process of doing that. I know I spoke with Vanessa, Cancer Commons as well, Adrian. So we have spoken with a few other nonprofits as well, but we're just, we need to do a better job at basically partnering with them as much as possible, because I feel like they have so much knowledge.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, honesty is great in these aspects because I just know if I get honest opinions, I can actually make it better. And that's just the whole idea, is to make it as good as possible by getting brutal, but potentially like brutal and honest feedback, because that's what's going to make this platform a lot better. And there is a long way for us to go as well.
We usually have like our patient navigator coordinators very up to date on the clinical trials. So like if you want to get in touch with any of the navigators for the adult side.
Yeah, so I know I am speaking with one lady from a nonprofit today that I met a few weeks ago. I think it's called Brain Bank, I think. So she's basically going to give me some feedback on how I can make improvements and how I can make improvements on the clinical trial aspect, and how I can actually keep it more up to date and what patients really want to see, because a lot of the information now is just from feedback from some patients, but we also want to get the opinion of the experts and people who are well equipped in this particular space.
We also have another question that was asked very early on. Why the name Meadow?
Okay, yeah. So MEDO stands for medical, is MED, options, O, in healthcare, H. It was just something it's just something I put together that I thought was a little easy, but I think it's a little hard for some people to understand. So I don't think it's the best name, but I thought the abbreviation was nice at the time.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, folks?
I see Alan Morris has his hand raised, I think.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me? I have an IT problem and I never can get these Zooms to work right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
So I'm a pathologist. I'm a community hospital pathologist. So that I'm just inserting my nonsense as a pathologist. You stated that you are focusing on GBM. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in some sense, taking a step backwards, the term is brain tumors. And as you know, there are many brain tumors, not just GBM. I presume you picked GBM because it's the most common brain tumor, is that a primary brain tumor? Is that correct?
So the reason I chose it is just more the coincidence of my friend being diagnosed with it. And I knew from speaking with him and him being in the community that a lot of other people had this problem. So that's why I decided just to start with one type of brain cancer, which is the one my friend had.
Right. You know, there's this semantics of uncommon and rare and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of said that you met several people with GBM and that affected you personally. From a community hospital pathologist viewpoint, I kind of view it as uncommon to, I wouldn't call it rare, but it's uncommon. Where am I going with this? The second most common one is IDH mutant astrocytoma, which can be graded 2 through 4 also. I take it you're not focusing on that, is that right?
So initially it will just be glioblastoma with any genetic mutations associated to that. We will be expanding into other brain cancers and upper spine cancers, but the whole idea for me is I've seen a lot of companies try to do all clinical trials at once, and it just doesn't work. The way I look at it is you have to do something really well for a really small group of people, make it perfect, or get what we call product market fit. Once you have product market fit and you have a system you know works well and people like your product, then you can start expanding into other areas. Right. So the whole idea is just really have a laser focus on one particular area, do a really good job with that. And once we have a system, we know that we can start expanding to other types of brain cancers or other types of deadly cancers that are available, that are common throughout the world that people have a similar issue with when it comes to looking for information.
Okay, so you've led me up to my $64,000 point that I want to make. I have the article right in front of me. It's called 2021 WHO Classification of Tumors. It's dated August 2021. The reason I'm bringing this up is because everybody that is a cancer patient starts with a name like prostate cancer or pancreatic cancer, and everybody just runs with it like it's a given. But there's actually a human being called a pathologist that makes that determination. And this, I'm going into a 64,000 thing that I think is profound. It turns out the classification of brain tumors changed radically in 2021. And what everybody has to remember if they want to be a citizen scientist and a very educated cancer patient is any research paper that predates 2021 has to be looked at with a very jaundiced eye. In other words, you kind of almost have to throw it out because you're dealing with a completely different disease set when it's reclassified, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
And I because everybody runs with the diagnosis, like, oh, I have GBM, they just assume that everything that existed before 2021 applies to them. And guess what? It does not, you know?
Yeah.
And because GBM has, I shouldn't say it. I mean, because it has a shorter course, obviously the current research, and since there isn't as many tools in the toolbox for it, the current research probably is getting at what the truth of what the disease is now. But that happened in prostate cancer and in almost all cancers going. It's just a profound thing that's lost on everybody that's not a pathologist, I think, or the researchers, the less than 1% of clinicians that do research. It's lost on them. And I just wanted to make, it's really important, actually. This 2021 thing changed what everything is.
So very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point, Alan. This is actually something that, not specifically what you said, but I've noticed is like a lot of the times patients, depending on, you know, how much patients research and try to understand themselves, I noticed that, okay, the only true way to actually get accurate results when it comes to patients are understanding someone's actual diagnosis, because like you mentioned, a pathologist is the one that is going to give those answers from doing pathology work. We're actually in the back end creating just a simple tool that allows people to upload electronic medical records. From that, we basically summarize and scan it and pull out all the most important pieces of information that are on that record. From that, it actually automatically goes into their profile. But what we're also doing is we're not just allowing patients to try to search, find, and understand the options themselves. We're creating technology in the back end. If they create a profile based on the information they upload into it, we're able to link them to the most eligible types of treatments and clinical trials. Because we also think that's important, that, okay, maybe it's easy to access the information on Meadow, but the further down the road you go, it will actually, we'll be able to be a lot more accurate with matching them to the right clinical trials and treatments that are available. So it's a very good point, because we know the further down the road we go, we want to make sure that the more information we can collect, the more efficiently we're able to match them with the right treatments and clinical trials. And it just takes a little bit of simple technology to do that. And that's something we're going to be able to do on our end too. Any other questions?
I think that's looks like all of them. Thank you so much, Mike. We greatly appreciate you coming and talking to Cancer Patient Lab folks here.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for having me. I definitely would like, I'm going to send out the link to Meadow Health to everyone. And I already saw, I think it was Al just mentioned that some of the trial links are broken. And what I'd like to do is just, if there's any mistakes or any areas of improvement you think you could see on the website or on the platform, please let us know, because the more feedback we get, the better understanding we have, or the better, like, we'll be able to fix those mistakes, but we'll also be able to make a better platform moving forward. So please feel free to like comb through it. anything that you see doesn't work or any little bugs, please feel free to highlight them. And we'd really greatly appreciate as many people's feedback as possible.
I've got one more suggestion.
Yeah.
That goes back to Alan's comment.
Yep.
I want to thank Alan for chiming in, because a lot of times what you'll see is some just simple things in terms of your semantics and your description. You're going to turn off medical professionals, and you really need a like a pathologist consultant, or make sure there's doctors looking at this.
Yeah.
Because people who go to sites are going to go ask their doctors. And if there's anything that, you know, I mean, doctors are busy. If they see one thing that's going to turn them off, it could hurt people actually getting, you know, good information. So it'd be great someone reviewing it, because I was great. I thought it was great that he chimed in and said that, because there's things you're just not going to know.
Absolutely. Very, very true.
Mike, I would just offer, as you continue to build this, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me personally if you want to get feedback, or any feedback that can help you to improve your product, because it's exciting to see where you're going and what you built so far. We know you're in the early stages, but I'm sure this will be useful to some of our patients. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. I'll definitely reach out.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Misha,
everyone.
for hosting too.
Of course,
Take
thank
care.
you.
Thanks, Mike.